Hello, Louisville. Guess who's coming to dinner? Good evening. Welcome to Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. Had to get stuff out of the way. I'm still arranging things because we've moved. So we don't have everything set up, but the beat's going to keep going on. You know what I'm saying? I am not going to let anything deter me from coming to you every Monday and Friday, 7 p.m. on Facebook, YouTube, and Jantastic Productions Roku station. So if you have Roku, you can type in Jantastic Productions. That's where you'll find Guess Who's Coming to Dinner. So here we are in November. Can you believe that? We've did our Veterans Day salutes this week. I had my friend Bruce Johnson who lives in London come on, and I'm starting to kind of reach outside the veil. You know, I have connections with people, a lot of people all over the world. I've met some wonderful people in my travels. And Bruce is the Marine that lives in London, who's also a show enough singing Marine. And we had a wonderful conversation on Monday, along with Mr. Stowler, the president of the Mumford Point Marines. And I've been posting a few posts that I've seen on Facebook about the Mumford Point Marines, because a lot of times people don't know of what happened to the Mumford Point Marines. So if you see some of those articles, read them. My uncle out in California, he's also kind of stays up with the Marines because he is a Marine. But tonight, I'm going to present to some and introduce to others my nephew. And my nephew is the one and the only Mr. Dominique Roberts. Hello, darling.
How are you?
I'm wonderful. I am so honored, because this show tonight is a little different because you wanted to be on this show. You had to say, Auntie, look, criminal justice is my thing. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. So tell me, how did you get interested in criminal justice? Tell me what happened. You told me, we had our little pre-conversation. So I know some things that they don't know. So give me a little intro into Dominique Roberts coming into 2021 as this grown man I got to give you some accolades, who's already graduated from U of L with a bachelor's in criminal justice, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Now attending, is it the University of Houston?
Texas Southern University.
Oh, Texas Southern University. And just going down the education path. I am so proud of you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
To know that, it's an honor to be able to say you're proud of somebody. And I am so proud of you. I got to sneeze. Hold on.
But God bless you.
Thank you. So tell me, what was the spark?
The spark for me started when I encountered the Trayvon Martin trial.
Okay.
That was a pivotal moment for me awakening into what is the American system culture. Mm-hmm. And I watched that trial every day. And I was riveted. I was fascinated. Questions. I really begun to dig into what is this thing called the criminal justice system that we all are a part of and have interactions with, whether it be being arrested or just seeing a police officer or paying our taxes. We support the criminal justice system. So that was really the first foundation of my understanding and getting involved. So when the Trayvon Martin trial happened and the subsequent verdict, that's when I was like, okay, I need to dig more and I want to learn more.
Right. That's something, that's something piques your interest that makes you say, there's more going on in this world, because at that time, you were a teenager.
I was a young teenager, and I did not know the story until I came across HLN. It's the court TV channel, basically.
Okay.
And I heard them talking about this case, and I was like, wow, this seems interesting. And when I heard what the facts of the case were through the media, but just the general facts, I was very angry. And I felt a lot of emotions, because the thing that I always tell people is that these instances are not just figments of our imagination, and they're not something that are just made up. It could be me.
Right. It could have been you.
Right. I could be a Ahmaud Arbery. The list goes on and on and on.
Right. And it's a sad thing to say, Dominique, that those things have to be in your consciousness on a daily basis. Not only do I think about it for you, I say, when my husband goes out, he's going to go to work. Nobody knows that he's a pastor. Right. The police don't know that he's a pastor. Some random individual who's a white supremacist doesn't know that he's a man of faith, right. And do they care? All they see is this.
It's a skin. And that's a very important part, because no matter how many degrees I have, no matter how proper I talk, no matter how nice I dress or the car I drive, the first thing people see is my skin. That was not my choice. I can't remove it. And that is, to me, what we're dealing with in our nation, is that very fact that before you even understand or get to know who I am, you're prejudging me based off something that I have no control over.
Right.
And that's just...
They have absolutely no control. But you in the same instance, there's nothing in your psyche that's making you prejudge this white person.
Exactly. If I see a white person run a crime.
You say it again, because I lost you. You went out.
I said, if I see a white person running, I'm not assuming that they just committed a crime.
But if a black person's running,
exactly.
They've done something wrong.
They've done something wrong. So I love and admire W.E.B. Du Bois, one of the people I admire, because he talked about how African Americans, black people, we always are in a space of living in double consciousness. Meaning that we live in two worlds. We have to have one foot in the white world and one foot in the black world. But we have to be aware and know these things, because unfortunately, we can't just walk down the street with the AK-47 and walk out. What
you said.
And it's just the facts of the case,
And get off and get acquitted. Did you see that today?
I did. And I'm sad to say I was not surprised at all.
No, was I. No, it was anybody, I think.
Right. That's a travesty within itself, that the system, which we'll talk about, was designed intentionally this way. So once again, rest in peace to Tamir Rice, who had a toy gun in a public area, but not even a millisecond, was just shot down, and the cop goes off scot-free. So
right, all of that. So let's talk about what we touched on when we wanted to see what direction we were going to take the conversation. Was that criminal justice, is built up of certain institutions, and a lot of people don't understand when people say criminal justice. I don't know if a lot of people just think it's somebody going to jail. It's not. But criminal justice are the institutions. Explain to someone who may not have a full grasp on what the criminal justice system is.
my estimation through research and teaching, the foundation of the criminal justice system was started during slave patrols.
Okay.
So we're going back to the times of slavery when, for example, a slave would run off of the plantation.
Right.
The helpmen or the workers, white workers on the plantation would chase and get the slave and return him back to the plantation.
Right.
So I consider that the first iteration of policing.
Right.
The second iteration is when, when KKK members
Okay. Come on.
went into the police force. I call it switching the white robe for a blue uniform. So that would be the second iteration of the police force. And now I argue we're in the third iteration of the police force, where we are seeing the history of vigilante justice
Okay.
and policing merge into one. So
Okay.
I believe we've had two iterations of the police force, and now we're experiencing the third, where we're having vigilante justice and dealing with the systemic stratus of racism, institutional racism, and intentional racism and injustice in a so-called justice system.
Okay. So let me say this. Let me ask you this. When we say systemic,
Yes, ma'am.
give me some examples of what systemic racism is, or in what mechanisms in these different institutions that we have that deal with criminal justice. What are some of the systems that have been put in place? And we went through this. We went through a list of things yesterday. So let's touch on what those systems are.
Mm-hmm. Number one, juries. We see that in the Ahmaud Arbery trial. 11 white jurors, 1 black juror. And the jury is the most essential part of any case. Before you get the judge, the prosecutor, it's the jury. The juries are the one who decides, like we've seen in the Trayvon Martin, Kyle Rittenhouse trial, if a person walks free or they're charged. And this is a side note, voting matters. To get on a jury, you have to vote. So voting, juries are...
What do you mean you have to vote? You mean you have to have voted in elections in order to be a juror? That's a prerequisite?
Yes, ma'am. You do. And in some states, if you have not voted, let's say 5 or 10 years, you'll be purged off the voting rolls, which means you can't be on the jury.
Okay. Now, black folks we dodged jury duty. Jury duty.
Yes, ma'am.
And that's something we should be standing in line
Ready
to be on juries, because that's where other people, mainly white people who take that as a part of being a good citizen, they take that role seriously, because that's where they get to judge us. We want we want the days off from work, but we really don't want to spend the time on the case.
Exactly.
And then there we are without equal representation on a jury.
Yes. And here's a fun, like we've seen in the Ahmaud Arbery case. When they go to select jurors from a jurisdiction, it's based off not race, but the people in that zip code. So when we say a jury of your peers, that does not mean it has to be a jury of your peers. A peers mean whatever zip code you're in, that's a jury of your peers. So once again, side note, voting matters. So juries are one. Juries are one. The second, tied back to voting, judges and prosecutors.
Okay.
2 other lanes that systemic racism has plagued and been prominent in the criminal justice system. The prosecutor, if for those who don't know, is the woman or man who is in charge of deciding if a case will be made or not. Meaning, in the Ahmaud Arbery case, we've seen that the first prosecutor declined to indict, which meant was she felt, for a multitude of reasons, but she felt that the case was signed, sealed, and done. That was a self-defense case. Ahmaud Arbery was wrong. There's no case. Okay, and she was voted.
You said that she thought Ahmaud was wrong.
Yes, ma'am. That the case was.
That's why she didn't take it to trial.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay.
And some other baggage with personal connections to the defendants and some other stuff. But in essence, she felt that the case was signed, sealed, delivered. So she did not charge. And prosecutors have that right. People don't understand how powerful a prosecutor is. They have the right to either decline to prosecute or to prosecute. So we elect prosecutors and judges and DAs. So it's so important, once again, side note, to vote, because we elect these officials. And when we don't vote, other people elect the officials. And this is the result that we get. For example, back home in Kentucky, Breonna Taylor, David Cameron, he was elected to be the attorney general. And we see what has happened since then. There's not been any charges. It will not be any charges in the unfortunate and unjust death of Breonna Taylor. This is once again back to side note, voting matters and how we have to be active participants. So prosecutors, the next will be judges. The judicial system is grossly represented and
mismanaged
and the disparities, that's what I'm trying to say. The disparities in the ranks of judges truly matters. We've seen that once again with the Kyle Rittenhouse trial. The judge did some very questionable things that we've never seen before, at least not on TV. And this is not to say that this has not ever happened or it doesn't happen, because we know it does. But once again, we have an active role in electing judges and being a part of the judicial process. So if you add and look at all three of those lanes, this is maybe a 1/2 of what the systemic stratas of racism have affected our system to get to where we are now. Mm-hmm. And all three of these things go in concert. You can't talk about one without having the other. So it's so important that we be active participants.
So we start with the police who lock you up.
Yes, ma'am.
And you go before a judge to get arraigned, who sets a bail that you more than likely cannot make.
Right. And the bail, and that's once again why I'm a big advocate for bail reform, because many people of color right now are sitting in jails and even prisons because they can't make bail.
And have not been to court.
And have not been to court. There's a great study, and there's research out there. And if you have not heard of the several bail projects, there's one in Louisville. They're all over the nation. Please look into those, because, and it will come to me. Bail is such an essential part of the first interactions with the criminal justice system, because if you can't afford bail, you sit in prison. And that in itself is a travesty, because we're saying that because you can't afford it, or you may be low income or poor, you deserve to be in jail or prison. It's preceding.
You deserve to be punished even before you are given a punishment.
Right.
Or whether you've been decided whether you are guilty or not guilty, you're being punished anyway.
You're being punished because as American citizens, we know it's per the Constitution. We are perceived innocent until proven guilty, not guilty until proven innocent. But too many times as people of color, we're already guilty before we can even get to trying to be.
No, we're guilty. We have to prove we're innocent.
Exactly. So
when we show up, we're guilty.
Exactly.
We have to prove that we're innocent.
Exactly. And we see this time after time after time with the Ahmaud Arbery case, Trayvon Martin, and Philando Castile, Tatiana Jefferson, and the list goes on and on and on of Black men and women, teenager, preteen, young adult, who are guilty before there's been any kind of evidence or any kind of case. We're just guilty. And
we're presumed. You know, it's an assumption. They've made an assumption about us because of the color of our skin.
Exactly.
You know, I wanna say this, that we talked about that policing came from slave chasers.
Yes, ma'am.
And so that whole mentality has not changed. Okay, to me, I don't think that whole mentality has changed. And see, I think there has to be, they want to know why the police cannot work well with the Black community. Because, see, some of those KKK have to be purged from the police department. You cannot expect change, as they say, that you do the same thing the same way, you get the same results.
That's very true.
We can't have these generations after generations. The father was policeman, the son's the policeman, the son's son is the policeman, and they all are deal in. They have racist ideologies in their minds. They will never change. They come in with bias.
Yes.
It's hard for everybody. Everybody's got some degree of bias.
Exactly.
Would you agree?
Oh, yes. We all do.
Everybody's got some degree of bias. But when you look at bias and you look at what kind of, because it's everything intertwines with everything else, your moral fiber.
Yes, ma'am.
You can be biased, but that doesn't mean that you can't be objective. You might not like a particular kind of person. It doesn't matter whether they're Black or white. If they're loud and boisterous or they're vulgar, you might not like anybody that's loud or boisterous or vulgar. Doesn't matter if they're Black or white. Doesn't matter. That's a bias. Okay?
True.
But when you cannot see past the bias to be objective, is this a good or bad individual? They may not be a bad individual. They just loud and boisterous and are vulgar. Might be because they don't know any better.
Exactly.
Like Mama used to say, they haven't had any home training.
Right. And what's common sense to one is not common sense to another. No, and I think that you touched on an important point that we have to understand. The question is always asked of those who are for criminal justice reform, policing reform. And it was asked to my former professor, and I was her intern, Dr. Cherie Dawson at the University of Louisville, by Police Chief Erica Shields at a forum that she recently had, where the police chief asked Dr. Dawson, did she like police? And it was, to me, another ploy. It's a tagline, and it's been asked because
you said again, it's a what?
It's a lazy question to ask.
Okay.
And rightly so, Dr. Dawson responded, yes, I love police, and I have Black children, and yes, I love police. And what she was saying in that exchange, in the bigger picture, is two things can be true. I am pro-police, but I am not for bad policing.
Right.
And I understand that two things can be true. And the idea in question that is constantly thrown in those who want to see great policing, good policing, is do you like police? Yes, we like police, but we don't like police who excessively use their force.
We don't like police brutality.
We don't like police brutality. We don't like police who shoot first, ask questions later. We don't like police who assume and take the side of a person with a shotgun and someone laying dead in the street, take their word for the whole truth. We
don't like police that put their knee on our neck.
Right. That's all we're saying.
We don't like those police.
Exactly. We're not saying that we don't like police. We
Right.
want great policing. We want the type of policing that you would get in Beverly Hills.
With some kind of dignity. There's when it comes to policing in regards to minority races and who are going to be majority races, that we probably already are, because we're already picking presidents. Okay, so if we stay in the same mindset, that look at what we're able to do when we come together in one accord, speaking in one voice, to move the needle, that puts us in a better position to be the same type of American that everyone else is. See, because we are identifiable. We are African Americans. Well, I always say nobody asked to come over here.
Exactly.
I don't remember anybody writing anybody a letter. I never saw it anywhere in any history books. Anybody wrote anybody a letter, and that gets to that critical race theory that we were touched on. That nobody wrote Christopher Columbus or anybody else saying, please take us to America. Just come get us. We're just out here in the wilderness and we need to be saved. Lord, please.
Right. Which he did not discover America, by the way. But yes.
But we know that.
Some don't.
See, when you teach critical race theory, then the lies that are in some of our history will come to surface.
Right. And can we just take a little point right there? Speaking of critical race theory, what is critical race theory? Because we've seen that in the news. We've seen it on certain television shows and certain talking points.
Okay.
Briefly, critical race theory came from Dr. James Bell, who was a Harvard professor and researcher in the 1970s, when he wanted to examine what is the causal relationship between systemic racism and institutions in the United States. And once, for those who don't know, critical race theory is not taught K through 12. It's barely taught in college, and it's taught at select law schools. So that would be the only time you would even encounter this theory. And the theory does not teach and say white children should hate themselves for being white. It does not say that white people should hate themselves for being white. It has nothing to do with anybody hating anybody. It's about examining structures, the foundational structures of this country that relate to systemic racism, and how does that intertwine back in the 1970s, but into 2021 going on 2022. That is what critical race theory is. And if anybody says different, they don't know what the heck they're talking about. They're just full of crap.
Dominique, you know what? You're amazing to me, because it's quite refreshing to be able to have this type of conversation with a millennial. You know, I don't know. How do you see, what kind of millennial are you?
That's a great question. Well, I would say that I am an optimist, regardless of all the evil and vile and losses that we may take. Meaning we, as in those who want to see a better criminal justice system in a better world, striving to make things better. I am an optimist. I definitely believe in speaking truth to power. And in the likes of W.E.B. Du Bois, Malcolm X, Dr. King, Sojourner Truth, Ida B. Wells, Angela Davis, and the list goes on and on and on. But I draw strength from the ancestors. I draw strength from reading history and understanding and learning about the past, because the issue that I see in today's society as a millennial is that we do not remember or choose not to understand the history from which we come from, that gives us an understanding and basis of to where we are today. So when, for example, back to policing, when someone says, why do Black people don't like the police? It's not that Black people don't like the police. It's just that the systemic history of policing has been against Black people since 1619.
It has presented a fear element. There is an element of fear when it comes to white police, white men policing Black people.
Exactly.
Period.
And the other thought that is provoked is that the idea of justice for Black people is a new thing. Think of it like this. The United States, the first slave was brought here in 1619. Just recently, 50 years ago, maybe, when we could truly say that segregation, Jim Crow was subsided, has Black people as a community been given the true time, place, and resources to receive justice in a system that was never built for us. The system was built for a Kyle Rittenhouse. It was never built for me.
No.
So we have to ask the question, and we have to think deeper about the questions. It's not that Black people don't like the police. It's the understanding and looking of history to see why Black people do not trust the police, because the criminal justice system, the power of the state, because when you are in the criminal justice, you're in the care of the state. And if you are arrested federally, you are in the care of the federal government. But state-wise, the power of the state is against you. And this has been the case since 1619, the 1700s, 1800s, 1900s, 21st century, into today. So this is a long trajectory to today of why Black people, minorities, do not trust the police, because the system truly has landed on us, as one Malcolm X said.
The history of the criminal justice system has not been justice for us. You know, they say just us. It's just us over here by ourselves. And like you said, it was designed not with us in mind, but to keep us in line.
And uphold white supremacy. Very much.
And uphold it. You didn't say, what did you say? Did you say uphold white supremacy?
Yes, I did.
Yeah. Okay.
Uphold white supremacy. And once again, the idea of justice for Black people, minorities, is a new concept. And we're still struggling to get some semblance of that today. But just the idea of pre-19th century, if you're accused of raping a white woman, you're automatically guilty. What would happen if you were lucky enough to get to the jail? You were lynched, burned right there on the spot. If you were lucky enough to get to the jail, you had a lynch mob, vigilante justice, come drag you out of the jail, lynch you in front of a lynch mob. So
make a spectacle of it.
Right.
Give no value to your life.
None at
all. Your
worth,
your character, your nothing, your being, your humanity. Have no regard for your humanity whatsoever.
None. So we look at Emmett Till. Same situation with the Ahmaud Arbery. All white jury. It takes them less than 45 minutes to say not guilty. That was justice back then. So for everyone watching, keep in mind that this idea of justice and a blind justice that's supposed to be Lady Justice is not a long-standing tradition for Black people. It is a new concept that we are still fighting to receive the full remnants of justice. I always say a Black person gets maybe a lowercase j when a white person gets justice, the full from top to bottom, start
all
to
caps.
All caps. They get every type of break you can think of, which we've seen in the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, and many others, they get justice. We get just a lowercase j.
Wow. Well, Dominique, I am once again. I've enjoyed this conversation, and I'm glad that I'm able to have a conversation like this with you.
Thank you.
To hear your growth, to be able to maybe challenge you to see where you are, and listen to you and learn some things myself today. So as your auntie, I am proud of you. Keep on keeping on. I know your grandmother and your granddaddy, Papa Rock, would be wonderfully adoring that you are at this level, because he was a history buff. Yeah, he loved history, but he was also, that's who I followed into being a child of the civil rights, because he sat on the lunch counters up on 4th Street.
Yeah.
So then I marched for open housing out in South Louisville. So you've got some of that in your DNA. In fact, you got a whole lot of it in your DNA.
I suspect I do.
I just want to say, keep doing what you're doing. And if we can come back and we can find another area that we can focus in on, because I can tell that you are reading, you are paying attention to current events. So we'll have a lot to talk about.
Unfortunately, fortunately, yes, there's plenty to talk about. A lot of different areas to talk. And I just want to say, I love you, Auntie, and I really appreciate the opportunity to speak on this, because it's just, we can't afford to have our heads in the sand.
No,
we can no longer do that. We have to be intentional, and we have to be real. And
everybody has to be proactive. Everybody has to be involved.
Everybody.
It's not it can't be us if all of us are not in it.
Exactly.
Does that make sense? It's got to be all of us. Okay. Yeah. So I want you to take care of yourself. You stay safe.
I will.
Be well. You coming home for the holidays?
I am working on it.
Thinking about it.
Okay. I'm thinking about it. As one goes through life, one gets more responsibilities and more things to do.
You can't always come home.
It can't always come home. But
I used to try to come every Derby, and my mother said they have them every year. So if you don't come this year, come next year.
Right. But to any family watching, I love you. I'm doing well. I hope you're doing well. And until next time, smile.
I love you. Take care of yourself.
You take care.
All right, baby. Ciao.
All right. Ciao, Bella.
Ciao, Bella. Isn't that wonderful? I mean, that's a young man. I think Dominique must be 26, 27. I think, what are you, 26, 27? What?
Actually,
how old are you?
Oh, boy. Actually, I am 29, turning 30 next year.
Oh, hush, bye. Nephew, that's wonderful. But he's on the right trajectory. He used that word a couple of times in our conversation. He's on the right pathway. He's learning. He's feeding his intellect. You have to be able to articulate what you feel inside and what you see happening with your eyes and what you hear. You need to be able to articulate those things. You have to speak about what's happening through your eyes. You have to be able to say what it is that you see. So I see that it's dinner time somewhere. It's dinner time now. So join us again. Today's Friday. So Monday we're going to have Mr. Bill Price from WLOU, WLLV. Bill Price has been with that radio station, I think, since he was a teenager. So he's going to come on and he's going to talk about Black radio in our community and how WLOU is a mainstay and how it has stayed the course. Okay? So we'll see you on Monday. 7 p.m. Facebook, YouTube, Roku. Join us. Guess who's coming to dinner? Bon appetit. It's dinner time. Ciao.